Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible and honestly mind-blowing transformations in nature. We're talking about how a tiny, newborn baby develops into a walking, talking, fully independent toddler. It's a wildly complex, absolutely beautiful process, and we're going to break the whole thing down for you step by step.
Okay, let's dive into this. If you're a parent or a caregiver, you've almost certainly looked at your little one and wondered, are they hitting their milestones? Is this normal? It's a totally natural anxiety, right? We're constantly looking around the playground, comparing our kids to others. But today, we're going to replace all that stress with real, scientific understanding and hopefully give you some serious peace of mind.
And to do that, we're not just guessing here. We're actually using the official guidelines from the Dutch youth healthcare system, often called the JGZ. This is a comprehensive, totally evidence-based roadmap that professionals use to monitor, prevent, and guide early childhood development. It's literally the gold standard in the field, and it's going to be our trusty guide today.
So, here's our quick roadmap for today. First, why development matters. 2, moving and grooving. 3, connecting. 4, the individual child. And finally, number 5, tracking progress.
All right, let's jump right into Chapter 1, Why Development Matters, and the hidden stakes involved.
When we talk about a baby learning to sit or walk, it's super easy to think it's just about physical movement. But the crucial point here is that a child's physical ability to move actually dictates their social and mental health later in life. It's really all connected. If a child falls behind in motor skills, they often develop lower self-esteem. They're actually at a higher risk of being bullied, and they can experience way more emotional problems like anxiety. This can lead them to pull away from social activities, which creates an inactive lifestyle and ultimately isolation. It's kind of this cascading negative spiral. Catching these things early is absolutely vital to keeping a child on a positive, healthy track.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, Motor Development, or as we like to call it, moving and grooving.
Let's look at the fascinating science of how babies actually learn to move their bodies. Now, in the medical world, there's this concept called the neural group selection theory. I know, it sounds super complicated, but here is what it basically means for you. Normal infant development is absolutely not a rigid, perfectly straight line. Instead, it's characterized by variation, complexity, and adaptability. A completely healthy baby is going to explore tons of different quirky and sometimes really clumsy ways of moving. They might look like a tiny, uncoordinated astronaut for a few months, and honestly, that is perfectly fine. In fact, healthcare pros will tell you that a lack of variation in movement is actually the red flag they watch out for, not a baby just doing things their own weird way.
Let's move to and see how this all builds across a basic timeline. Between 4 to 10 months, early involuntary reactions, like the Moro reflex, that startled, arms flung out reaction, that starts to fade away as the brain matures. Around 6 months, babies typically start rolling from their back to their belly. By 9 months, they're usually sitting up stably. And around 12 months, they're pulling themselves up to stand and kind of cruising along the furniture. But please remember, these are just averages. There's a massive, perfectly normal spread in the exact ages kids hit these marks.
Okay, Chapter 3, Social Emotional Growth. Connecting.
While the body is busy figuring out how to move, the brain is doing something equally incredible. It's figuring out how to bond with other humans. You can think of social emotional growth as this ladder of emotional intelligence. At 0 months, a newborn already recognizes their parent's voice and seeks out that constant skin-to-skin safety. By 3 months, they're smiling and kicking with pure joy when they see familiar faces. Then, between 6 and 9 months, this massive shift happens. They suddenly realize they're a separate person from you, which, often leads to stranger danger. And by 9 to 12 months, they're actively initiating contact, playing peekaboo, and even making little jokes. They are literally becoming their own independent person.
Now, that 6 to 9 month phase often brings up separation anxiety. Parents stress out about this all the time, thinking their baby has somehow regressed. But we really need to reframe this. Separation anxiety isn't a setback at all. It is a brilliant cognitive leap. It actually means your baby has developed object permanence, meaning they finally understand that you still exist out there in the world, even when you leave the room. It's actually a huge developmental milestone that's totally worth celebrating.
Which brings us to Chapter 4. The individual child, focusing on character and temperament.
As babies grow, it becomes super obvious that they aren't just robots on an assembly line. Every single baby has an innate personality, which means they require entirely different parenting strategies. And this brilliantly illustrates how temperaments differ. On one hand, you have the easy baby. They adapt quickly, they're super easy to soothe. But caregivers, beware here, because they're so quiet and compliant, you really have to be intentional about giving them extra attention so they don't get overlooked. Then, on the other hand, you have the slow-to-warm-up baby. These little guys just need time. If you rush them or overwhelm them with new situations, they'll just shut down and withdraw. As a caregiver, you have to be really patient and follow their natural rhythm.
And then there is the third type, the unpredictable baby. They might react completely differently to the exact same situation from one day to the next, and they get easily upset by change. For these beautiful, chaotic little nervous systems, the absolute best medicine is a strict routine. Regularity basically creates a safe container for them. When they know exactly what's coming next, they can finally relax and just thrive.
All right, our final section, Chapter 5, Tracking Progress, the Van Weechen Onderzoek.
So, with all this physical variation and emotional complexity we've talked about, how do doctors actually measure growth? Well, now, what's really interesting about this slide is that we can see the actual grid, called the Van Weechen Onderzoek, that Dutch professionals use. And yeah, it definitely looks a bit overwhelming at first glance, right? Lots of tiny boxes and checkpoints scattered across all these different months.
But let's break that complex grid down into a much more simplified matrix. Basically, doctors cross-reference the child's age with their physical movements and their communication skills. So, for example, at 3 months, are they lifting their head to 45 degrees, and are they making varied sounds? Fast forward to 9 months, are they crawling forward and babbling? The healthcare professional is looking at all these domains together to get a truly holistic picture of the child's overall neurological health. But here is perhaps the most important takeaway from those medical guidelines. Checking the boxes on that chart, that isn't the final goal. The guidelines explicitly state that just hitting a milestone on time isn't enough if the quality of the movement is poor. What truly matters most is the child's adaptability. Can they adjust to their environment? Can they creatively solve physical problems? Ultimately, resilience and movement quality are the true, ultimate indicators of a healthy child.
So bringing it all together, it really comes down to this core theme. A normal motor development is characterized by high variation, complexity, and an increasing adaptability. Let that sink in. There is no single perfect straight-line way for a baby to grow up. The messy, complex, and highly varied path is exactly what nature intended all along.
So, knowing that variation is completely healthy and every child's path is uniquely theirs, I'll leave you with this question. What unique, quirky new milestone will you look for in your child today? Try to observe them with fresh, completely stress-free eyes. Celebrate the wonderfully messy process of growing up. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.